anniversary of Phyllis, the Schlafly Show. It's the after party for Mrs. America on Hulu, where each week we gather in a room and we drag Phyllis Schlafly for filth, and then also kind of break down what is going on in second wave feminism at the time of Phyllis Schlafly. As always, joining me are my co-hosts, Mojiala Waddell.
Hey.
Molly Gaebe.
Cheers to you.
And today we are so excited to have our special guest, who is the Executive Director of Progress Women and a former state representative from St. Louis, a woman who actually governed over Phyllis Schlafly in the town she lived in while she was alive, the one and only feminist icon, feminist hero, Stacey Newman. Hey, Stacey.
Hey guys, how are you? Yeah, I brought my Schlafly beer. Was that good?
Yes.
You know, I like it because it is from the liberal wing of the Schlafly clan.
Exactly. This is not Phyllis's brewery. It's her nephew's brewery. And actually, he wrestled the trademark away from her. So, you know, we all like Schlafly. Oh
my God, That's amazing. Well, each week we have a cocktail, and this week our cocktail is a Who Needs a Manhattan? So emphasis on man. So I've got mine, and we're just gonna basically drink brown liquor, call it a drink, and talk about episode 5, which really is quite an episode. But before we dive in, Stacey, I just want to ask you, as somebody who is a righteous feminist, a radical progressive, who held public office in Schlafly's backyard while she was still alive, what is her influence like there in St. Louis even now?
Yeah, we're not convinced she's dead. I'm not.
Okay, great.
I think she still is considered, you know, the grandmother now, you know, the matriarch of the conservative women.
Before we kick in, is there anything you guys wanted to talk about just in general about the episode? Any just like gossipy, shitty things you wanted to throw out before we dive into the text and the subtext?
I'm just happy they started the episode with bad feminist black box theater. Can you see my cock? Oh, this is what a marriage is. This is what a marriage is. This is what a marriage is.
This is why they hate us.
Waiting for a moment. I think I auditioned for one of those roles as the penis, but I didn't get it. So it was a little hard for me to watch. But
I think I spent all of my college years and sometime after it definitely at that show, that one.
I think you know you're a good feminist when you see one of those shows and you walk out of it and mock it. And that's when we meet Brenda and Mark Feigen-Fastow, and we kind of get a glimpse into this power couple. We kind of saw Brenda Fastow in some of the episodes, but we didn't really get to know her. A little bit of backstory on her. She was one of the first women at Harvard Law. One of her professors was portrayed in that movie, The Paper Chase, who is a total sexist, who called on women once a year in class and then defined that day as called Ladies' Day. And she was worked with RBG in the ACLU's Women's Rights Project. So that was pretty cool. So we meet her and she's a super badass. Mm-hmm. And I liked her instantly.
I did too. And I also felt like when sort of recounting that story, I was like, oh, that is the gift of second wave feminism, right? Like, even if we didn't get all the things, we know that we didn't have to deal with that in college.
That was my generation. That was what, you know, you knew that you wanted to do stuff and you knew that you were smart, but you had to figure out how do you navigate all those comments, all of those, you know, I mean, it continued in when I was in the legislature. I mean, that was only a couple years ago, you know, where I was called little lady and I was called, you know, any way that they could figure out how to demean a woman being there.
You know, when we first really meet Brenda Feigen, Fastow, she's with Gloria Steinem and Ruth Bader Ginsburg in a waiting room, and they're going in to have a meeting with one of Nixon's aides to talk about this women's task force that, of course, a man is planning and going to staff up. And,
Absolutely.
And I remember something that hit me about that scene was he walks out and he asks them,
"What are you doing to neutralize her?"
And Gloria Steinem answers with an answer, which to me is the sort of embodiment of why we're always losing.
We wrote an expose on her in Ms. Nothing stuck.
Well, we wrote an article about her.
Done and done. We've won. Yeah, that hit me too. That's like a central question, I think, of this show. You know, we're looking back from a modern age now, but I'm just always wondering what it was like to know how to neutralize someone like Phyllis Schlafly, because to me, I'm seeing them do both ways. They engaged with her, and they after ignoring her, we know it didn't work. She wasn't neutralized until the day that she died, or didn't die, Stacey. So I still don't know, like, what is the effective way to deal with someone like that? I'm interested to know what you guys think.
Yeah. I actually feel like we don't get any answers. I feel like moving ahead just slightly in the episode when they're sort of talking about it, Brady Friedan is like, no, it's a bad idea to talk to her. And it's like, well, just an episode ago, you were willing to go against the squad to talk to her. So it's really interesting that her opinion had changed.
They made the assumption that people actually were going to embrace this idea of women's equality, and that men were actually going to give up power to women. And I think that was such a fatal mistake. And even when Gloria's talking to the Nixon aide about the task force, and you know, she says, why don't you hire a woman to run the women's task force? That should have been a light bulb.
Oh, but that wasn't the point, though. That wasn't the point. The point was to have a women's task force, meaning we're giving you something, regardless of what it does. What's also important is to look at Phyllis's friends. That's how she got so much power, because Phyllis knew exactly what her friends were thinking and what to say to them. Mm-hmm. And no one else was talking to them.
Also,
right.
I think radicals often look strange to everyone, right? And so, like, you know, when you look at like the pro ERA feminists, right, with their armpit hair and their like natural hair and their just sort of unconventional lifestyles, it's really easy to point to that and be like, what, you want that? For anyone who doesn't have any vision, who is really comfortable with conformity.
But I think that's why it was so brilliant to have Brenda and Mark be selected to debate Phyllis Schlafly and Fred Schlafly, right? Because they were attractive. They didn't look like that typical unfuckable feminist couple. You know, they were both like super slick and very attractive. And I think that was a good.
Well, plus they were young. Think about that too. I mean, that had to get, you know, to Phyllis. The fact that she was aging, and the fact that we all know that she wasn't a lawyer, and how much that bothered her.
Mm-hmm. And they were very sexy, right? Both of them, I think they were. They seemed like they were both lawyers. They both had these high-powered careers. They lived in New York. Like, they had a very sexy seeming life. They also, even the way they were portrayed on the show, they seemed quite sexy together.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Moji. This episode was very sexy. I noticed that early on. But this, I think, really worked in favor of Brenda and Mark, because one of the main arguments that Phyllis makes, and I've said this before, is that it's basically an argument over like the happier life, right? That there's the natural order of things, which is to be a submissive wife, or you can go on the other side and just, you know, grow your armpit hair and, you know, have an open marriage. And she argues that will make you unhappy. So seeing Brenda and Mark happy, sexy lawyers killing it on stage, it's like,
also aggressively feminist. Like, both of them were aggressively feminist.
Who wears the pants in your family?
Well, we both do. Brenda looks much better in them than I do. But our marriage was really forged in the crucible of feminism, so we don't have assigned roles.
Yeah, and I would even say one thing that I thought was interesting was there was the one thing that we learned in this episode was the hidden secret that Brenda and Mark were working through, and the hidden secret that Phyllis and Fred had, right? And the hidden secret that Brenda and Mark have is that Brenda has this hot ass lesbian experience and has to tell Mark about it. And the conversation around Mark's wokeness was slightly problematic, I think.
If it was another man, that would be something else entirely. But a woman, I mean, that's practically a rite of passage for a radical feminist.
Oh, phew. It wasn't a real affair. It was just you dabbling in that. And I wish I could have been there to watch. Like I was waiting for him to say that.
It's a sort of
It just felt like
regressive, like sexist kind of wokeness, right? Like it's like, I like recognize your like sexual autonomy, but also like it's fine if it's women. Women are not as important. That's really the subtext, I think.
That's what I felt like too. And then it was only when they had the second affair, right? And she was like, I did it again. And then it was right before the debate when she tells
Liz, it wasn't second. We got that it was ongoing. She'd been doing that for weeks, if not months, by the time she tells her husband. That was a new life. That scene in the bar, that scene when she's in the bar with other lesbians, they weren't just meeting her. They knew her. She'd been around.
So through this relationship, we see how problematic Mark is, because I think it's also a reflection of the place of women at the time, where that women are not legitimate, therefore they are not a competition to me or a threat, whether it be in the boardroom or the bedroom. And we see that through his reaction there.
But don't you guys think too that it was the generation? That was the time? I mean, you know, he couldn't have gotten away with saying that today. But at the time it was
no,
like,
I
oh, it was
absolutely
just a
think
woman
that.
you were having.
I think that's why I called this sort of regressive wokeness, because I feel like probably for the time that was as progressive as like a cis privileged white man could get. Like, it was a big step.
Yeah, and that
for his time.
And it just kept, and then the lobbing on of Brenda's feelings of confusion, and then also her thinking she's pregnant. The second she says, I think I'm pregnant, right before the debate, they're in the hotel room, right before the debate, she said, I think I'm pregnant. And he's like, oh, that's great, that's amazing. Oh my God, not even considering like, does she want to be pregnant? You know, what is she thinking? What's happening? And I love that when he's like, well, do you want to have it? And she's like, I don't know what I think because you keep talking. And I thought that was so brilliant because he was just yammering his opinions.
That was also our second Ruth Bader Ginsburg cameo, when he's like, Ruth and Marty say that it's fine. You can make it work whenever it happens. I didn't get that till the second viewing.
But then also, if anybody who's seen the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary or film or subsequent film and documentary, you know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg raised her kids, did Marty's homework when Marty was sick, took care of Marty, did her own work. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a one-person, like, intellectual wrecking ball. She was amazing. And it was like, no human could do what Ruth Bader Ginsburg does. She is like onto herself in that. So fuck you, Mark.
He did take her last name though, however.
Yeah.
What?
But didn't you guys pick up? Did you guys pick up in the debate? That didn't you? I had a secret feeling that Phyllis wanted. She wanted to be Brenda. Didn't you guys pick that up? But I just picked up that she was a little envious because she knew that Brenda didn't have to fight all those men that she was fighting.
When they were in the green room backstage and they were trying to make small talk before the debate started, and the 3 out of the 4 of them, who were all lawyers, were talking about Harvard and talking about law school and talking about this and that, and could effortlessly talk about that.
You know when I miss Cambridge the most? In the fall. Oh, that foliage.
Made studying for torts less bleak.
And Phyllis couldn't offer anything, and you could see her feeling inferior. But thank God she was wearing that giant cross around her neck that I think they actually crucified Jesus on. The thing she was wearing around her neck, man, was huge.
Can you get a bigger cross?
Her cross was gigantic. I've never seen anything like it. It was like, I'm religious. That's her jam, I know, but it was wild. But yeah, and then when they went out, and she was just, Phyllis was thrown. And I think that, you know, what redeemed me about Mark a lot was they had, oh my God, you're having an affair with a woman. Oh my God, you're pregnant. I don't know if you want to be. We're having this crossroads. Emotionally, we don't know where we're at. And when they took that debate stage, Brenda and Mark really pulled their shit together in a big way.
You have scared the women of America into believing something that is not based in reality. But when you argue an actual point in the real world in a court of law, you need to cite a case to support your argument, so cite the case.
I think that actually the way that Brenda and Mark sort of pulled it together, like they just talked about infidelity, they just discovered, or assumed that maybe Brenda was pregnant, and I was like, oh, we're gonna see them flop. And so that was a really big sort of like plot twist that happened to me that was really nice and gratifying. I think the whole episode from the beginning was a build up on how Phyllis clearly passionately wants a law degree, and Mr. Phyllis Schlafly is mad that he's Mr. Phyllis Schlafly.
Yeah. Oh, look, they quote you at length. I think you look very handsome in the photo.
Not bad. So how does it feel to be Phyllis Schlafly's lawyer
To
husband?
me, this whole episode was really a build up from this initial scene where Fred is losing it. By the end of the episode, it looks like he's aged 20 years.
Yeah.
But so we see him humiliated, right? They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Let's like revise that to hell hath no fury like a man humiliated. He was out to get Phyllis after that. And I thought it was really cool what they did in that initial scene after he's humiliated. And because Phyllis's whole argument, again, is based on a hierarchy of marriage, right? Fred is supposed to be at the top. And this is the episode where that starts to shift. And we literally see this. This was a split-second shot where there are scales in Fred's office. And right before they cut away, someone puts their finger on it and shifts the balance. And so I feel like that's the whole setup for the breakdown at the end of this debate where they just lose it because Fred has been knocked off his pedestal.
I think the whole series is, kind of pointing out that Phyllis really took the ERA as a way to get her power back. Remember, she lost 2 congressional races, remember? And then Fred, was putting her down about it. So to me, Phyllis had a taste of power, and she figured out if she was to make the ERA a big thing, get back into, presidential politics, it gave Phyllis her power back. But I don't think that she really believed it.
She did not live the life that she espoused, right? Like I think Brenda said it in the debate. She was like, you're not a housewife, you're a full-time lobbyist. Like the sort of bed that she wanted to make for women in her countering the ERA was not the bed that she wanted to sleep in.
Right. So it was about power for Phyllis, right? It wasn't about believing in what she was arguing. I mean, that's why it was so easy for her to come up with all those lies about what the ERA actually means. I mean, we knew it was a lie then. I actually testified in a Missouri ERA hearing back in 2007. And I think that Phyllis was in that room. Even by that time, she was kind of, old news and nobody cared about her. But the same arguments, about, that, women will get drafted. Well, women were already in the military, So I think by Phyllis coming up with all of those lies that, remember, her husband couldn't even support.
You hung me out to dry.
You made up a case. I couldn't defend you without looking foolish.
And I think Fred secretly was happy to see her fail because he wanted to see her taken down a notch. And remember, he was the one that suggested, why don't we do a couples debate, right? Why don't we do a couples debate? Because he wanted to make sure that he was inserting himself into the situation and not allowing her to have center stage under the guise of, I'm a lawyer, I can back you up. And then we watch that scene where it is the grossest scene ever when she's so appreciative of him suggesting that he take center stage.
Thank you, Daddy.
Ew! Ew! Oh, yuck! That was so gross!
Erase it from my memory.
Oh!
Record.
Why?
Oh my God, I'd rather walk in on my parents having sex than on that.
What you said, Molly, what you said. God, that was disgusting.
Well, and what was so crazy about it, she was on her knees saying, thank you, Daddy. And then she's pissed off when in the debate, he says, my wife is submissive. And when she, before every public speaking engagement, says, my husband gave me permission to be here. And then she's surprised and pissed.
That was wild. Okay, so I won't lie. I probably had a fantasy or two that involved Cate Blanchett on her knees saying, thank you, daddy, to me personally. Like, that may have happened. But I think that the way it played out in that scene was disgusting. And then the slapping. Just got really, really dark and BDSM in not a fun way.
But didn't you guys think that she felt she had to do those things? I mean, you know, come on, the whole thing with her father and her mother becoming destitute when he died, you know, Fred was her paycheck.
That is why she's so garbage, is that she could have her entire life. She watched patriarchy and she watched a lack of an ERA hold her back from everything she wanted to do. Even if that shitty ass fucking thing she wanted to do was literally be even worse than Henry Kissinger and just blow the shit out of any country who was fucking with us, you know, just being part of that weird Bilderberg group, you know, all that stuff, you know, and that she couldn't be that. Instead of saying, I'm going to make sure women can be as warmongery as men, she just rode on the backs of men so profoundly that it was like, that's what makes her just doubly horrible.
Yeah, and she committed to it for the rest of her life. You know,
also, Liz, she didn't ride on the backs of men. She rode on the backs of women. She totally rode on the shoulders of men. She walked all over the backs of women. Her whole campaign was basically subjugating women.
Yeah, the way she treated her friends. Why did her friends respect her so much? Think about that. I mean, she wasn't living their life.
Stacey, are we going to say that they were friends because they seem a little bit more like subjects?
Exactly. But they were looking up to her because she was a leader, right? She'd figured out how to tell them what they needed to hear to keep them, you know, as her posse. But Phyllis was pretty smart. But the only thing I think that she got caught with is that she couldn't figure out how to get out of, you know, that whole patriarchy thing herself. She felt she had to play the game, but she didn't know how to get out of it, even though it caught her a lot.
It's the devil's deal. You can't get out of it once you commit. You know, I think it's important to note that that submissive line, which is such a huge line in the show, that's from a real interview.
She has a very strong, dominant kind of style to the way she works. Is she the same way at home? Does she wear the pants in the family?
No, she doesn't. I'm obviously physically larger than she is. And,
he chins himself 25 times every morning.
And she's very submissive.
Submissive?
Oh, now.
Phyllis Schlafly, submissive? Is that right?
Well, Fred is the boss of the family, and that's the way it is.
So while the rest of the feminists are trying to dismantle an entire system, she's, you know, sitting back, enjoying the proximity to white male power. So,
well, she's basically like, my one seat at the table is enough, right? I feel like part of feminist thought is like you create seats at the table, and she's just like, nope, I just need one, just me, I'm good.
Well, because remember, she had to be talked into the ERA. Remember, it just wasn't her main issue. That really said a lot to me because she didn't believe it. She didn't think it was important. It wasn't a big deal.
And I think when you juxtapose her with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and with Brenda, right? Who some of the first women to go to Harvard and graduate Harvard Law, who decided to take those opportunities to further opportunities for women, right? And for Phyllis to be working as hard to take away opportunities for women so that she could further opportunities for Phyllis. Like, it's such a glaringly great, I think, moment to have those two things be introduced at the same time. And then realizing she had to get a law degree to be considered respectable at all.
she's gonna get herself into some dark situations like we see with her gay son John, who in this episode we see her grappling with, you know, some man who he probably had sex with comes to his door with his wallet. And I love the struggle that we see Phyllis go through, which she, you know, I feel like there is a God when like deeply bigoted assholes have gay children. I'm like, okay, there's a God. I mean, it's bad for them, but you know, it just makes sense. So seeing her, she dug her own grave with this. It's like, now we have to see, because it's all about the facade for her. And if the outside world knows that her son is gay, A, it's a reflection on her, and B, her entire, you know, argument is dismantled. So that was a really interesting part of this episode that I'm
in that scene. In that scene when the guy shows up with her son's wallet, with John's wallet, I was really torn. I was like, is he shaking her down because he knows that this is Phyllis Schlafly's house? Or is it just like, I was wondering what his angle was. And I don't think we'll have the answer to that, but I thought that was, it was sort of back into what I felt like in all of the other relationships we saw. People were talking and maybe they weren't hearing each other, but they were talking. But in the Schlafly household, people seem to discuss things psychically.
Is that a cat thing?
I feel like she came to talk to her son about being gay, and all of a sudden they were just talking about smoking, but she knows what he meant.
Yeah, it was definitely that. I think he definitely knew, because the payoff for a regular family, if your son's gay, there would be shame around it, but you couldn't publicly humiliate parents in a way like that. Like, he knew that was Phyllis Schlafly's, that the dude that wallet he had was Phyllis Schlafly's son. And the intimation, they never say gay in it. You know, that we never have been told that Phyllis Schlafly's son is gay, but it's inferred throughout and through behaviors, and we see. And that end scene when she's talking to him about his gayness, and then she compares it to, you know, smoking cigarettes.
And do I have to force myself to resist the seduction of cigarettes? Every single day.
And I just wanted her son to be like, you know, smoking cigarettes and smoking cock are different. You should try it out. Really. Like,
yeah.
But she really, like, again, in the things that they're not talking about, she's like, I found your wallet in the mudroom. And I was like, you couldn't tell your son that some skis showed up with his wallet and he needs to just stop, like, leaving his wallet at the skeezy places he fucks? Like, I don't know.
The mudroom. That is good. I'm gonna use that. Yeah. Gay people are really thrown under the bus in this episode. And I think it's interesting that you know, Mark's logic really, you know, there's a line between Mark's, oh, this is just a phase, gay logic to this, which is where, you know, like, it's mind over matter, which is what she says. And those are, you know, two faces of the same coin there. And then we also have that scene with Margaret where she's in the gay bar talking about why she's moving to the West Coast.
I go to NOW meetings on Monday, National Black Feminist Organization on Tuesday, Lesbian Alliance on Wednesday, and PTA on Thursday. It's exhausting.
So she feels these splintered selves that she's being forced into, and then she's hoping in the West Coast she can finally be this, you know, singular human. And I think that's like indicative of where the movement was at this point, where people couldn't be whole people. You were either gay, black, feminist, whatever. And we see this in the gay.
But I also think too that Margaret was like, this is a white space full of white people, and I really want to work in a space that is run by black folks. And that is, I just want to be around more black folks. And I think that she, you know, because when Gloria was explaining to Frank that Margaret was leaving, Frank's like, yeah, she probably is just engulfed in whiteness and would really like to just live in her space and her skin and with her people. And
see, and this is my take on this episode. People weren't saying things because actually all he said was, she told you that?
Yeah, right, yeah. And then Gloria's like, yeah, do you think that's not it?
For the schools.
I do agree with that because I feel like at some point they were like, "Oh, you're going to San Francisco," and she was like, "Oakland." Like, very
Let's be clear
about where in the West Coast she would be.
I'm going to Oakland. And, you know, it was like, these were smaller relationship moments, but I think they were important. And I think, you know, before we wrap up, I think the last sort of thing that happened in this episode was, you know, we see Gloria and Frank, and then all of a sudden we see Gloria fucking that guy from Nixon's office because she just wanted some information.
You're not gonna add your name to my FBI file?
Well, we both do.
I never traveled to Cuba as part of the Vince Ramos Brigade, by the way.
When did you go through it?
When I sent you out to get coffee for me.
I like that she was shameless about it. She was like, "Yeah, I checked my file. You got some things wrong. We're not doing this again."
Well, and remember his comment. His comment doubted her. Remember? When she said, "We're not doing this again," his comment was, not so sure about that.
And
So
apparently the facts show
that.
up that they dated for some years.
Right.
You're right. They
But didn't
dated for
part
some
of you
years
know-
afterwards.
Those were the old style Republicans, right? I mean, you can't imagine that scene today.
I was talking to my mom about it, and I was like, "Oh, we forget that like old school Republicans were just conservative Democrats."
Right.
Yes. So wrapping up, highlights. What was your favorite moment and why, Stacey?
I think one of my favorite moments I just been glued to everything in it. Was I kind of like the idea of when the debate, because, you know, that's when we were all kind of on edge to see, you know, how are both couples going to pull it out. And of course, you know who we were rooting for, but you wanted to see Phyllis, you know, be destroyed. And I think she was.
Right. Yeah. Moji, anything stuck out that you were like, oh?
It wasn't so oomphy for me. I think that when Brenda and Mark are talking about her pregnancy before the debate, and he's like, "We're radicals. We can make whatever world we want."
We've always played by our own rules. We can choose to build our family however we want.
And I was really hopeful about them making whatever world they wanted, and then the world that they made was heterosexual, normative, married people. But I was like, "Oh, this is like something I can sink my teeth into," and then they just settle normal.
Molly?
Something else I could sink my teeth into is the hot pool scene. I had really, it was just so deeply hot. And I have nothing smart to say about it other than I needed to take a break from the show for a second to truly process what was happening in the feminist movement at the time. I'm just kidding. It was just hot and I had to leave the room and come back to the show, but everything's okay now. It was a good quarantine scene for me.
For me, I'm going to jump off of yours, Molly, because for me, one of the moments that I loved was that they went from that hot pool scene right into that Phyllis rubbing Fred's legs submissive scene.
How's that?
That part of it was like showing the juxtaposition of freedom versus obligation. I was like, that was really powerful to me. So that's what I liked. Mochi and Molly, as always, thank you. Stacey Newman, thank you so much for bringing your insights and for fighting the good fight in the land that Phyllis Schlafly built.
Yeah, come back to Missouri before we die. Literally.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think I'd like to. I'd like to come back to Missouri, have some barbecue, go to that crazy city museum, and visit you and your lovely husband, Bert. So give him our love and thank him for giving you permission to be here. And until next time, thanks, y'all. Enjoy your who the fuck me.
Can I request we end a certain way? Can I request we end with bad feminist theater? Okay, everybody do your worst bad feminist theater. This is what a marriage is. This is what a marriage is.
My vagina is not your vagina.
I am a penis. I am. Oh, I love you guys.
Love you guys.
Abortion Access Front, fueled by cheap wine and the stench of patriarchy.